They called him Mozart. All of France knelt before his hands. The backhand, one-handed, effortless, a brushstroke from another century. By the time he was 9 years old, the entire country had decided his future. Magazine covers, national headlines. The champion France is waiting for. But Mozart had a secret. He hated the stage. When his classmates walked past the tennis courts at school, the boy who was supposed to save French tennis would hide. He'd lock himself in a bathroom stall, sit there in silence, wait for the footsteps to fade. He didn't want anyone to know he played. He didn't want anyone to see. And at 17, after the pressure had hollowed him out, he walked up to his father and begged, "Find me an internship at a magazine. I'm done." How does a man blessed with the most beautiful backhand in history spend 30 years trying to escape his own gift? January 1996, Paris. A 9-year-old boy stares at a magazine rack. His own face is looking back at him. The headline reads, "The champion France is waiting for?" Richard Gasquet didn't feel like a champion. He felt shame. The boy didn't ask for this, didn't campaign for it. One day, he was hitting balls with his father in Béziers, a quiet town in the south, the kind of place where nobody watches. And the next, an entire nation had drafted him into a war he never enlisted for. France hadn't produced a Grand Slam men's champion since Yannick Noah in 1983. 13 years of silence. And now, here was this child. Frail shoulders, enormous talent, a backhand that moved like a matador's cape, being fitted for armor he couldn't carry. They grouped him with Monfils, Tsonga, Simon, the new Four Musketeers. The label felt noble from the outside. From the inside, it was a leash. Because Richard Gasquet wasn't built for war. He was built for beauty. His one-handed backhand wasn't just effective, it was art. The kind of shot that made old men lean forward in their chairs and whisper, "That's how it's supposed to look." Angles no one else could find, topspin that bent physics, a wrist that worked like a painter's, precise, fluid, almost reckless in its elegance. But beauty doesn't win trophies, not alone. And the France that worshipped his hands never bothered to ask what was happening inside his head. April 2002. Monte Carlo. Gasquet is 15 years old, 10 months. He walks onto the clay against Franco Squillati, an Argentine veteran twice his age, and dismantles him. The youngest player ever to win a Masters 1000 match. The world nods. The prophecy is on schedule. 3 years later, same city, bigger stage. Gasquet draws Roger Federer in the quarterfinals, the #1 player on the planet. 3 match points against him. Any normal kid folds. Gasquet saves all 3. Then he wins. The youngest Frenchman to beat a world #1, Monte Carlo, erupts. The narrative writes itself. The heir has arrived. By July 2007, he's standing on the grass of Wimbledon, down 2 sets to Andy Roddick, the American with the cannon serve and the iron jaw. Gasquet claws back, set by set, point by point, wins in 5, reaches the semifinals, climbs to #7 in the world. And here's where the story should soar. Here's where the music swells and the trophies start lining up. But the fracture was already there, hidden, quiet, growing. Because while the world celebrated his rise, Richard was making a choice that would define and limit his entire career. His serve was weak. Everyone knew it. Coaches told him, analysts told him, the numbers screamed it. He didn't care. Gasquet found serve practice boring. The repetition, the mechanics, it bored him to death. What he loved was the chess match, the rally, the 20-shot exchange where he could paint the court with angles and watch his opponent drown in beauty. A dominant serve would have shortened the points, would have made him more efficient, more dangerous. Probably would have won him a Grand Slam, but it would have killed the thing he loved most. So Richard Gasquet, the man they called Mozart, consciously chose pleasure over trophies. He chose the beauty of the rally over the brutality of the ace. and in doing so, he wrote his own ceiling into existence. Some men are destroyed by what they can't do. Gasquet was limited by what he refused to become. There's a photograph from 1999, Tarbes, France. The tournament is called Les Petits A, the Little Aces, and it's the most prestigious junior event in the world. Two boys, 12 and 13, shake hands at the net. The winner is Richard Gasquet. The loser is Rafael Nadal. Remember that image. Burn it in. Because Richard will spend the next 23 years trying to get back to the right side of that handshake. On the junior circuit, Gasquet was the standard, the prodigy, the one coaches pointed at and said, "That's the future." Nadal was the kid from Mallorca who ran too much and hit too hard and didn't have the classic game that purists admired. Then they turned professional, and the world inverted. Nadal became a steamroller. Gasquet's word, not mine. Rouleau compresseur. On clay, on hard courts, on grass, it didn't matter. The Spaniard's topspin chewed through Richard's elegance like acid through silk. The losses piled up. 1, 5, 10, 12. At some point, Gasquet can't say exactly when, he stopped believing he could win. He'd walk onto the court already beaten. Not in his legs, not in his backhand, in his head. The shadow of the boy he once conquered in Tarbes had become a giant that blocked out the sun. 18 matches, 18 losses, 0 wins. On the professional tour, Richard Gasquet never beat Rafael Nadal. Not once. He doesn't hide from it. Losing 18 times to the same player is a huge regret, he said. It doesn't make me smile. And the people on the street never let him forget. He estimates he heard it 10,000 times. Maybe 20,000. But you beat Rafa at Petit As! Strangers, fans, taxi drivers, all reminding him of a victory at 13 that had become the cruelest sentence of his adult life. Then came Miami. March 2009. Gasquet withdraws from the tournament with a shoulder injury. Routine, unremarkable, except the drug test comes back positive. Traces of cocaine. The world that once called him Mozart now called him something else entirely. The details were sordid, designed almost to humiliate. A nightclub, a woman named Pamela, a kiss. Just a kiss, he insisted. The Court of Arbitration for Sport eventually agreed. Contamination through physical contact. He was cleared, fully exonerated. But innocence on paper doesn't mean innocence in the soul. Gasquet emerged from that tribunal a different man. Paranoid, withdrawn. He stopped going out, stopped trusting. The lightness that once defined his game, that balletic ease, was replaced by a rigid wariness. He described himself afterward as unsociable. A man who'd lost his innocence, not to the drug, but to the exposure, to the headlines, to the world seeing him not as an artist, but as a scandal. A man can survive losing 18 times. A man can survive a weak serve. But surviving the moment the world decides you're guilty before the verdict, that leaves a mark no acquittal can erase. There's a training session captured on camera. The year is 2014. Gasquet is hitting with Nadal. A practice set, nothing official. Richard shows up with 2 rackets. Within the first few minutes, both have snapped their strings. Not from Gasquet's power, from Nadal's. The image tells you everything. The artist brought his brushes to a demolition site. By now, the body has started collecting its debt. And the body, as any man past 40 knows, doesn't negotiate. It doesn't send warnings. It just stops. Gasquet felt it in his back first, then his legs. The movement that once flowed, that effortless glide that made him look like he was skating across clay, became labored, heavy, mechanical. He described it with a brutality that only honesty allows. I don't have any margin over the others anymore. If I'm not at 110%, physically and mentally, I can't even win a match. Think about that for a moment. A man who once beat Federer with room to spare now needed every last ounce just to survive a first round. The years between 2015 and 2024 became a slow reckoning. Injuries stacked. Rankings slipped. Younger players, kids who hit with two hands and moved like machines, filled the draw sheets where his name used to sit comfortably. Gasquet watched the sport he loved transform into something he feared. A game of robots. His word, robots. Players who hit hard from both sides, no variation, no artistry. The one-handed backhand, his backhand, the shot that defined his existence, was going extinct. He became the last of the Mohicans. His words again. The final guardian of a dying art, swinging his one-handed blade against an army of two-fisted machines. And yet, he kept showing up. Not for trophies, not for ranking points. He kept showing up because the alternative was worse. Gasquet described retirement as a petite mort, a little death. The thought of waking up without the structure of training, without the cage of competition, terrified him more than losing ever could. For 30 years, tennis had been his prison and his sanctuary. Without it, who was he? He'd never really had a life outside the lines, so he started building one. Late. He bought an apartment, moved in with his girlfriend, adopted a dog, a mutt named John. These are things normal men do in their 20s. Gasquet was doing them at 38, assembling the architecture of an ordinary life that tennis had stolen from him before he was old, enough to know what he'd lost. November 2017 offered one final burst of light. The Davis Cup final. France versus Belgium. Villeneuve d'Ascq. Gasquet, paired with Pierre-Hugues Herbert, won the decisive doubles match. A team trophy, not his alone, shared, but for a man who'd spent his career under the solitary weight of national expectation, sharing the load felt like liberation. It was the closest he ever came to being the champion France always demanded. And maybe, just maybe, it was enough. May 2025. Koch, Philippe Chatrier, Roland Garros. The red clay is bright under the Paris sun, and Richard Gasquet, 38 years old, deep lines carved into a face that was once boyish, walks out for the last time. His opponent is Yannick Sinner, the world #1. A kid born the year Gasquet was already winning Masters-level matches. The result is inevitable. It always was going to be. But when the last ball lands, something happens that no statistic can measure. The crowd at Chatrier rises, every seat. The ovation rolls across the stadium like thunder, and it doesn't stop. Not for a champion, not for a Grand Slam winner, for a man who stayed. 24 consecutive seasons with at least one ATP victory. Only two other men in the Open era can say that. Jimmy Connors and Roger Federer. 610 career wins. More than any Frenchman in the history of the sport. More than Yannick Noah. More than Tsonga, Monfils, or Simon. Richard Gasquet doesn't leave tennis as a frustrated champion. He leaves as something rarer. Something more honest. He was the man who chose beauty over power, pleasure over efficiency, the rally over the ace. He refused to become a machine in an era that rewarded machines, and he paid the price in trophies he'll never lift. But he held something else, something the robots will never understand. He held the backhand. One hand, one shot. The most beautiful stroke the game has ever produced. Swung 10 million times by a man who never wanted to be famous, and who spent 30 years proving that grace, even when it loses, still matters. The boy who hid in bathroom stalls finally walked off the court in plain sight, and France, all of France, stood and watched him go.